The Intercoastal Waterway runs like a secret spine down Florida's Atlantic coast, a maze of rivers, lagoons, and barrier islands that stretches for miles in either direction. To the people who live along it, it's paradise. Great fishing, great surfing, small town feel, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their docks. On the morning of July 23rd, 2000, something shattered that peace. A local judge, standing in his backyard, noticed something large and dark floating in the river. At first, he thought it was a manatee, but as it drew closer, he realized that he was looking at something different. It was the body of a young woman. A seasoned investigator responded to the scene, and what he found was an immediate puzzle. The victim carried nothing to identify her and had clearly been in the water for several days. There were no gunshot wounds, no broken bones, no obvious case of death. The water had erased much of the story that her body might have told. But not everything. Her hands and feet had been bound with nylon rope, the kind commonly seen on sailboats. It had a distinctive double diamond pattern, and the ends had been deliberately burned to prevent fraying. That kind of detail spoke to planning. The knots themselves were unusual. Cow hitches, tied in a very specific way. A knot consistent with Navy training. Wrapped around her eyes and neck was duct tape. Not the standard gray. This tape was white. Rare. Even then. Investigators logged it and moved on. At the time, it seemed like just another detail. It would later become much more. The killer had intended for the body to stay at the bottom. He'd filled plastic shopping bags with rocks and tied them to her as weights. But the bags tore and the body rose. Those grocery bags carried something unusual. A store logo and a set of stamped production numbers identifying the exact machine and shift that made them. Another thread. To figure out how the body ended up where it did, investigators ran a drift test, releasing a weighted bundle of coconuts upstream and watching where they floated. They landed in the same spot every time. One of the deepest sections of the river. Locals called it the black hole. This wasn't a body rolled off a bank or dropped from a bridge. It had been dumped from a boat by someone who knew these waters. The clues were building, but investigators still had no name for their victim. That changed through a procedure called degloving. An incision is made around the wrist, and the outer layer of skin is carefully removed intact. A forensic technician slides their hand inside the skin like a glove and rolls fingerprints. It's grim, painstaking work. And it worked. The prints matched a young woman named Misty Morse, whose fingerprints were on file from a minor misdemeanor arrest. Misty was 22 years old. She'd recently moved back home with her mother. By every account, she was the kind of person who lit up a room without trying. Her family called her a friend magnet. She had no known enemies. The people who loved her couldn't imagine anyone wanting to hurt her. On the night of July 19th, 4 days before the body was found, Misty got dressed, showed her mother her outfit, and went out to meet friends. She never came home. After 4 days without a word, the family knew something was wrong. When detectives arrived at the door, Linda Morse opened it, looked at them, and said, "It's her, isn't it?" Now investigators had a name. Now they needed a killer. No one who knew Misty could offer a single lead until the lab results came back. A strand of non-human hair had been found twisted into the rope that bound her hands and feet. The hair belonged to a dog. Dog DNA was new territory in 2000, but it opened a lead. Whoever killed Misty owned a dog, had access to a boat, and knew the black hole. That profiles led investigators to one name: Brent Huck. Brent had dated Misty on and off for years. He came from a well-to-do family on Merritt Island, lived off a monthly allowance, and liked to tell people he was a Navy SEAL. He wasn't. He hadn't even passed the swim test, but he had served, and he loved boats. He captained vessels between Florida and the Bahamas. He was comfortable on the water at night in a way most people simply aren't. His house sat directly on the river where Misty's body had been found. When investigators knocked on Brent's door, a dog came rushing out, a German Shepherd Rottweiler mix. The detectives looked at each other and said nothing. They didn't need to. Brent let them search the house. He seemed confident, the kind of man who believed he was smarter than everyone in the room. In his bedroom, on the dresser, detectives found a crumpled piece of white duct tape. When the forensic detective held it up, Brent's jaw dropped. In the kitchen, a grocery bag, identical to the ones used to weigh Misty's body down. Same store logo, same stamped production numbers, same machine, same shift. And then came the rope. Divers searching the river behind Brent's dock pulled up a length of double diamond nylon with the same unusual cow hitch knots used to bind Misty's hands and feet. Then the DNA results came back. The dog hair found on Misty's body was consistent with the German Shepherd Rottweiler mix living in Brent Huck's house. No single piece of evidence was the smoking gun, but taken together, they built a wall. During interrogation, Brent gave up the motive without even realizing it. On the night Misty disappeared, he'd been at a bar when a rumor reached him that Misty was pregnant with his child. Brent had just gotten engaged to another woman, someone from a well-connected family, the kind of match that his mother approved of. The rumor threatened everything. He called Misty. They argued. He called again and said they made up. The autopsy would later show Misty was not pregnant. The rumor was false. He had killed her for nothing. Prosecutors laid out what happened next. Brent picked Misty up that night, brought her to his house, bound her hands and feet using the cow hitch knots the Navy had taught him, and a single dog hair became tangled in the rope. He wrapped white duct tape around her. He filled grocery bags from his kitchen with rocks. Then he took her out to the water to the deepest part of the river and threw her in, likely while she was still alive, believing the black hole would keep his secret forever. But in this case, it didn't. Following a 2-week trial, the jury deliberated just 3.5 hours before finding Brent Huck guilty of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, he looked stunned, an expression of a man who had genuinely believed he was too smart to be caught. The evidence that sealed it was a single strand of dog hair twisted into the rope. The dog's name was Sheba. Misty had given Sheba to Brent as a gift years earlier, when she couldn't keep the puppy where she was moving. Misty knew what she was doing. She loved that dog. And in the end, that dog brought her justice.